Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Good afternoon, everyone, and assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you. I'm Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important discussion. As you all know, we begin our programs always with the name of God. What I said at the beginning of this program was, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise and thanks belong to God, the Lord of the worlds. May peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all of God's prophets and messengers. So again, thank you all for joining us today. We are here today on behalf of over 80 Muslim American organizations who have united to call on the Justice Department to investigate the anti-Muslim hate group IPT, its founder, Steve Emerson, to determine whether or not that organization violated any federal laws by spying on, infiltrating, and working to undermine Muslim American organizations and houses of worship for over 10 years, using, in some cases, paid spies. Today, God willing, we are going to briefly recap some of the facts that many of you are familiar with. Then we're going to hear from some of the representatives of the organizations that signed a letter to the Justice Department calling for that investigation. If you have any questions you'd like to share, whether you're a member of the media or a member of the public, you can post it in the comments on Facebook. If you are a reporter, you can actually join the program behind the scenes. The instructions for that are on our website, and we can take your questions there, and we will take those questions at the end of the program today. So with that, let's get started. As many of you know, last month, CARE announced that the director of our Ohio chapter had been terminated after we learned that he had been acting as a spy for the so-called Investigative Project on Terrorism, an anti-Muslim hate group founded by the right-wing conspiracy theorist Stephen Emerson. How did we first find out about this? Well, over a year ago, back in the fall of 2020, a whistleblower who worked for IPT for many years reached out to us and let us know there is a mole inside of your organization. And furthermore, the organization had been spending years spying on the broader Muslim community, mosques, civic organizations, civil rights organizations, Muslim leaders, including then Congressman Keith Ellison. We learned over the following months through documents and audio recordings and emails that this organization was spending an incredible amount of time, energy, and money trying to infiltrate and spy on and undermine the American Muslim community. Why? Well, according to the IPT whistleblower and another individual who has come forward in recent weeks confessed to spying for this organization, the point of all of this was to undermine the Muslim community to make sure we would never become politically, civically strong enough to change American foreign policy, especially American foreign policy as it relates to the Israeli government and its human rights abuses against the Palestinian people. The whistleblower from IPT put this in their own words. In a statement, they said they came to realize they were not working to defend America. They were working as a lobbying organization for the Israeli government. Now, all of this is disturbing. It's concerning. What was even more disturbing is that we learned that this organization had been in direct contact with Israeli intelligence officials, offering and receiving support from them. So again, all of this disturbing to hear that they had been targeting so many Muslim organizations for so many years, infiltrating our community, working with, collaborating with, providing help to a foreign government. And it all begs a question, was any of this illegal? Did IPT break any laws by recording people without their permission, by infiltrating organizations under false pretenses, by doing all of this to undermine the civil rights of American Muslims, to undermine American Muslims' ability to worship peacefully? Did they break the law? You know, that is not for us to determine. That is for the Justice Department, for law enforcement to determine. And that is why over 80 American Muslim organizations signed a letter to the Justice Department calling on DOJ to investigate this behavior and to determine whether any laws were violated, and if so, to take appropriate action. So with that, let's dive into the program. We're going to hear from various Muslim leaders, some of them directly impacted by the spying, others of them not, alhamdulillah, thank God, but nonetheless, they recognize this is an issue that impacts our entire community, and they wanted to share their thoughts and their solidarity with their fellow brothers and sisters. So let me first bring on our National Executive Director of CARE, Nihad Awad, to share some welcoming remarks and thoughts, and then we will continue on through the additional speakers. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nihad. And make sure to unmute yourself, Brother Nihad. There you go.
People thought after 2 years of the pandemic, we will know that
Not at
we
all.
should unmute whenever we speak. Anyway, thank you very much, Edward. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum, peace be to you. Thank you all for joining. And special thanks to our colleagues and leaders and representatives of national, regional, and local Muslim organizations who are joining CARE today in calling on the United States Justice Department to take action, to investigate evidence that the investigative project on terrorism and its leader, Stephen Emerson, have spent over a decade conspiring to infiltrate and spy upon mosques, community leaders, national organizations, and almost every activist, every major and minor activist in the Muslim community, all in an effort to undermine the American Muslims' ability to engage the public, to engage the government, to engage the media, to advocate for the issues they believe in at home and abroad. The spying also included a spying on the first Muslim member of Congress, Stephen Emerson. Keith Ellison, the founder of IPT, the Investigative Project on Terrorism, paid spies within the Muslim community and from outside the Muslim community to obtain information, record meetings and gatherings without the participants' permission or knowledge. All of this was to undermine the American Muslim community by sharing information with a foreign government. That is the state of Israel. Last month, as Edward Mitchell mentioned, we have released information and evidence, documentary evidence, showing that Stephen Emerson has been collaborating with the Israeli government in spying on American Muslims and their institutions for almost more than 1 decade. However, for the public's information, Stephen Emerson and his organization, the Investigative Project on Terrorism, have been conducting a smear campaign against American Muslims for over 3 decades. Almost every Muslim leader or national or regional Muslim organization, whenever you Google them, most likely you are likely to find Google hits from the IPT, Investigative Project on Terrorism, mainly cherry-picking quotes, misinformation about the American Muslim community for 3 decades. You can imagine the amount of misinformation, disinformation, and harm that Stephen Emerson and his organization have inflicted on American Muslims for the benefit of a foreign government. Unfortunately, there is a widespread perception within American Muslims that Israel and its agents in the United States are acting above the law. And the United States government are not capable or willing or able to investigate those entities and hold them to an account. I hope this is not true within the government, and I hope and I wish that our government will prove once and for all that everybody is under the law and no one is above the law. And everyone, if they're found guilty of violating the law, federal laws, in working with foreign governments to harm American citizens and American residents, that they will be held accountable. So today, specifically, we're asking Attorney General Merrick Garland, Inspector General Michael Horowitz, and Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Kristen Clark, to receive our letter that was sent to them on behalf of more than 80 national and local organizations to look into the possible violation of federal law by Stephen Emerson and his group. This is one of the largest sign-on letters that American Muslims have issued, and it's an indication that the majority of American Muslim leaders and representatives of organizations feel the threat to their freedom of speech, freedom to express themselves, to assemble, that these freedoms are under attack. They have been violated by these individuals and organizations that are serving the state of Israel with impunity. Almost every mosque project, school project, or a major activity that the Muslim community undertook to empower itself and create equitable space for its children and for their neighbors have been come under attack by Emerson and his allies. And American Muslims should feel safe and protected by their own government. And I hope that the government will heed our call. And we also call on Congress to monitor the situation and conduct hearings into the activities of these hate groups that have been trying to deprive American Muslims from their constitutionally protected rights for the benefit of a foreign state. Thank you all for joining, and I'll be happy to assist my colleagues here in answering any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Nihad. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. I would next like to welcome on Dalia Muhammad, who is the Research Director of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. Many of you know it as ISPU. Dalia, assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Please share your thoughts.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the Director of Research of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And we do research on American Muslims and on the policy issues that impact the community. And I just wanted to bring in the idea that this organization that has targeted Muslims is part of a wider network called the Islamophobia industry. This is a well-documented network of organizations and individuals whose sole purpose is to generate hate and fear about American Muslims and to undermine our civil liberties. So why does that matter for the wider country? Because Islamophobia is a threat to every single American who cares about freedom and safety. We've documented links between endorsing anti-Muslim tropes, which is what they endorse, what they promote, and acceptance of authoritarianism, acceptance of even violence against civilians. So Islamophobia is bad for democracy, and we implore our Justice Department to just investigate. That's all we're asking for. Investigate whether or not these activities have violated the law.
Absolutely. Simple as that, right? And you can imagine, Dalia, in other circumstances, if another civil rights organization from another faith community had been targeted in this way with help from a foreign government, pretty sure there would be a very quick and swift response from our leaders. And so I think American Muslims are simply asking for the same treatment that others receive. And at the same time, noting that we don't need this, right? This is not just for us. We're not dependent on anyone else to help us, especially the government. We are self-reliant, independent. We rely on Allah, but it's the right thing to do. When a crime is potentially committed, you investigate and you hold those responsible accountable. Dalia, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate ISPU's support and your thoughts, and we will be in touch, inshallah. Thank you. I would next like to welcome on Brother Mustafa White, who is the Vice President and Chairman of the Council for Social Justice in ICNA, the Islamic Circle of North America.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Mustafa. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. Thank you for having us on. And on behalf of the Islamic Circle of North America and its Council for Social Justice, we condemn this type of activity by any organization who perpetuates this kind of thing against Muslims. So we stand with our Muslim brothers and sisters in the various organizations and in the Islamic community against this type of activity. This is unfortunately nothing new. We've seen this before in the history of this country. But in particular, this particular type of activity is directed solely at the Muslim community in the form of Islamophobia, as our sister just said. And as Keith Ellison has said, it's a deliberate effort to spread disinformation and pit American against American. It creates hate and it creates nothing good. It's only negative. So this type of targeting peaceful Muslim organization activity should be addressed by any and all legal means. And the Islamic Circle of North America and its leadership and Council for Social Justice stands firmly with our community and making this attempt by the grace of Allah. That's short and sweet, but that's the way we have it. That's what we're working for, to confront these kinds of Islamophobic activities. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Brother White. Jazakallah khairan. We appreciate it. And thank you to Dr. Mohsen Ansari and everyone at ICNA for your support and solidarity. Jazakallah khairan. Next, I would like to welcome on Sister Hassan Abdullahi, who is the National Executive Director of the Muslim American Society, Public Affairs and Civic Engagement, Mass Pace. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Hassan. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Good to be here with all of you.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, this is a very, very concerning time. The Muslim community has suffered, as all communities of color have, from over surveillance, spying, and criminalization in general. And we know Islamophobia, as my dear brother Mustafa White just mentioned, is nothing new, as many of our members can attest to. But the lengths in which the investigative project went in undermining Muslim organizations and leaders and spying on this community for the benefit of a foreign entity is despicable and un-American. Accountability matters, and this is why we're joining CARE and the numerous organizations in requesting the Department of Justice to investigate this matter to determine if any federal laws were violated. When the Muslim community is being harmed, as this incident has, we must send a strong message that these types of fear-mongering and spying of this community or any community here in American soil is not tolerated. These type of surveillance and spying has a chilling effect, but the American Muslim community refuses to be silenced. The American Muslim community is resilient, is strong, is visible, and our government must address this issue and ensure, again, that no federal laws have been violated. I think the ask is very, very clear. That's why we're keeping it short. And as you said, Brother Edward, if it was happening in any other community, there would definitely be outcry. Then the silence is definitely.
Thank you so much, Ismahan, and thank you for the work that you and Mas do. May Allah grant you success in it. Keep it going. Let us know how we can help. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your words. Next, I'd like to bring on Brother Seif Rahman, who is the Director of Public and Government Affairs at Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center in Virginia. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Seif. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Brother Edward. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I think this is fairly simple for us as an Islamic center, as a center that has been attempting to be civically engaged. There's a social contract that binds us as Americans. That social contract is the Constitution, and then the enshrining of the Bill of Rights, the first of which reads the right of the people to peaceably assemble and peaceably petition their government and be civically engaged. When any institution tries to undermine those rights and do so in a way that purposely targets a religious minority in our country, we need to look at whether there have been federal law and constitutional issues associated with people trying to undermine the First Amendment rights of the American Muslim community. I think as a community, we look forward to having public debate. We look forward to the public square being a place where we can all get together and discuss and debate. But for one group to try to undermine through means that are possibly illegal the rights of others to be civically engaged is despicable and abhorrible, and is something that goes against our very, very core values as Americans. So we call on our government to see whether there are constitutional issues with trying to undermine minority religious communities and their ability to civically be engaged and petition their government and their rights of free speech. Thank you to CARE for taking the lead on this. We are a supportive signatory to this, and we as a community have been targeted specifically, unfortunately, by some of these abhorrent acts. So we look forward to a government investigation, just as our government has been very diligent in investigating security threats. Threats to our Constitution and threats to the civil and civic rights of Americans are no less important than threats to our security.
Thank you so much, Brother Seif. We appreciate it. We appreciate the work of Dar al-Hijra to serve the community. May Allah protect you all, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Jazakallah khairan. Next, I'd like to welcome on Brother Muhammad Ali, who is the Director of Policy and Government Relations at Impact, the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Muhammad.
Hey, walaikum salam. Good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Muhammad Ali. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Relations at the Muslim Public Affairs Council, which sadly was one of the organizations on that infamous call. This kind of behavior underscores the tragic reality that not only do far too many in our society believe that American Muslims are not actually American, but are a threat to our great nation, and they're willing to take action on those distorted beliefs. Our system of democracy is based on the idea that it is for the people, by the people, and American Muslims are included in those people, and we must not be treated differently because of how we choose to worship. Given that, we call upon and insist that the Biden administration, through the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security, do all that is in their power to ensure those behind such heinous acts are brought to justice, future acts are prevented, and ensure that each and every American Muslim never feels threatened and certainly not face physical harm. We also call upon Congress to investigate what happened and why it was allowed to happen and what must be done going forward. At the Muslim Public Affairs Council, we pride ourselves on our decades-long interfaith work with churches and synagogues around the country, and we look forward to sharing with them what happened and leaning on their support as we continue to work with the Biden administration to reverse these disturbing trends. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences during these trying times. God willing, it will make us stronger as a community and as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad. We appreciate it. Thank you for impact support, and we look forward to working with you on this issue. Next, I'd like to play a brief video, and then we're going to start taking some questions. So one of the questions we've already received is, who funds hate groups like IPT? CARE just released a report a few weeks ago, an Islamophobia report titled Islamophobia in the Mainstream, that focused in on about 26 anti-Muslim hate groups that we profiled several years ago. And we profiled them again this year to see whether or not they were still receiving the same amount of money from major charitable foundations that they had received in prior years. I want to play you a brief video, about 2 minutes long, that'll show you what kind of funding IPT has been getting from major foundations in recent years. And then we will hear from a few additional speakers and take questions and then wrap up. Producer, let's go ahead and put that video on screen and play it if we can. The reason anti-Muslim bigots invest so much time and effort and money in targeting and spying on our community is because they know our community is important. They are terrified that Muslim Americans are going to use our political engagement, our political strength, our civic engagement, and our legal work to advance justice, to advance just policies here and around the world. That terrifies them, and you know what? They are right to be afraid, because that's exactly what we've been doing, and God willing, inshallah, it's exactly what we're going to keep doing, no matter how much hate groups may hate it. Thank you, Ismail, for playing that video, and thank you to Omar Al-Saray for putting it together. So that was one of the questions we received from a media outlet. So who funds IPT? again, those are just some of the funding that they have received in recent years from some mainstream charitable foundations that are acting as pass-throughs. That is, someone donates to a donor-advised fund, they recommend that money go to IPT. The fund checks to make sure IPT is a nonprofit organization and that it checks through the boxes, and if so, that money is passed through. There are other foundations that give money to IPT directly, knowing full well that they're a hate group because that foundation supports the hate that IPT spreads. So look, funding for these hate groups is very serious and it's very dangerous. And in the case we're talking about today, these anti-Muslim hate groups were using money, over $100,000 for just one spy over a 4-year period to pay for spying on the Muslim community. And what Mr. Emerson would allegedly do is take money donated to IPT, transfer it to his for-profit corporation, SAE Productions, and SAE Productions was used to pay at least one of the moles who has come forward to speak to us, a Virginia Muslim who came forward to confess. And so again, this raises the question, does that violate any laws, right? I'm a former prosecutor, but I can't answer that question. That is for our Justice Department to answer by investigating this issue. I'd like to ask our producer to put the letter to the DOJ on screen. We're going to show very exactly and precisely what the requests are to DOJ that we have made. Producer, let's share screen and put that on if we can. Thank you. Let's scroll down to the last page and go full screen if we can so it's more visible. There we go. You can go back up to the list of requests. There you go, right there, 1 through 5. So the letter reads, as you all can see. So to protect the civil rights of American Muslims, we ask the Department of Justice to launch an investigation to determine whether Stephen Emerson or the so-called Investigative Project on Terrorism broke any federal civil rights statutes or criminal laws by targeting the Muslim community. Specifically, we are asking the Department of Justice to determine, number 1, whether using paid spies to secretly record the private conversations and activities of American Muslim civil society organizations, houses of worship, and Muslim leaders, including a member of Congress, without permission, over the phone and in person across state lines, whether doing that violated any federal laws. Number 2, we are asking the DOJ to determine whether or not using paid spies to infiltrate American Muslim civil society organizations, leadership circles, and houses of worship in order to obtain their private documents, record their private conversations, and otherwise spy on them to undermine their work, whether doing that violated any federal laws. Number 3, we were asking DOJ to determine whether or not Mr. Emerson transferred funds from the nonprofit organization IPT to the company SAE Productions for the purpose of paying spies to target the Muslim community on behalf of IPT, and whether doing that, playing with money in that way, violated any federal laws. Number 4, we want DOJ to determine whether or not IPT provided any information about American Muslim leaders, civil society organizations, or houses of worship acquired through spying to the Israeli government or any other foreign entity or anyone else in violation of federal law. As those of you who've read the evidence we released know, there's at least one example of the Israeli government asking Mr. Emerson for information about the American college student group, Students for Justice in Palestine, right? And there's another exchange in which Mr. Emerson sends an email to his own staff with a forwarded message from the Israelis, and Mr. Emerson says, in the subject line, something to the effect of urgent research request from Netanyahu office. So again, question, does doing any of that work for a foreign government violate federal law? And did Mr. Emerson provide any information he acquired through spying to a foreign government? Number 5, finally, we want DOJ to determine whether or not IPT spied on the American Muslim community in collaboration with, on behalf of, or for the purpose of benefiting other anti-Muslim hate groups like the Middle East Forum founded by the racist Daniel Pipes, members of Congress who we know were in touch with IPT, or a foreign government or any other entity in a way that violated federal law. So those are the things that we want DOJ to investigate. There's one other important piece of this puzzle. We are asking the Inspector General of the Justice Department to determine whether or not any federal law enforcement agents were in communication with Stephen Emerson or IPT, whether they were aware of what IPT was doing to the community through the spying, and whether or not any federal agencies accepted information that was collected by IPT in violation of federal laws, regulations, or policies. Part of the reason we've asked this question is that one of the individuals who came forward, the Virginia Muslim who spied on the community for IPT, he told us that IPT at one point arranged for him to meet with a law enforcement official in New York, that this official would not identify himself, but asked a lot of questions, and eventually decided he did not trust this Virginia Muslim, and so did not give him any information. But this again raises the question, were any law enforcement agencies aware of what IPT was doing to the Muslim community, especially Representative Ellison? And if so, if that violated any laws or policies, that needs to be addressed as well. So again, we have sent this letter to DOJ. We hope to receive a response soon. And I want to thank the over 80 American Muslim organizations who have joined us in this call. You can look at the letter to see literally every major American Muslim organization has joined this call. And we thank the community for uniting in solidarity. And that's an upside of this attack on our community, that it brought us even closer together to defend each other, to defend ourselves from bigotry. And what these anti-Muslim hate groups would love to do is to engender suspicion and distrust, have us looking over our shoulders, worrying about the new convert at the masjid, the new employee. But we're not going to do that. We're not paranoid. We're not worried. Number one, because we're doing good work. We have nothing to hide. Number two, because we fear God and we rely on God. And so as long as we are doing the right thing, we have nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear at all, God willing. And so to these anti-Muslim hate groups who are terrified that our community's civic engagement and political work and legal action will advance justice in this country, I say again, you're right to be afraid. We've been doing the work and we're going to keep doing it. And what you have done to us will not stop us. In fact, it has only made us more intent on doing this work. So again, thank you all for joining us. I'll ask my producer if there's any other speaker in the back room who wanted to share any thoughts or any other questions from the media. If not, we will wrap up in just a moment. Producer, anything else we need to address before we close? Excellent. Yes, we have one more speaker, and I'm so glad she made it. Let me welcome on Daisy Khan, who many of you know not only is a Muslim leader, member of Park 51, but also, alhamdulillah, she has been doing an excellent job in advancing civil rights and human rights in this country and around the world for so many years. And Ms. Khan and Park 51 were, as some of you may know, targeted during the debate over Park 51 over 10 years ago. IPT infiltrated a national community Muslim call to address that issue. And IPT infiltrated that call with a spy and recorded members of Park 51 and many other Muslim organizations. So I want to thank Ms. Khan for joining us today. Let's bring her on. Assalamu alaikum, Ms. Khan. How are you?
Walaikum salam, Edward, and thank you so much for doing this incredible work and bringing us all together. I'm sorry I joined late. I was on another call trying to troubleshoot some stuff, but I'm in full support of this because any one of us that gets attacked, it is an attack on the entire community. As you know, that project that we wanted to build was very much derailed by these efforts. These efforts may seem like small efforts, but actually they're not, because they had a ripple effect. This information was widely shared with the opposition groups that had aligned with this particular group. And, they have the same talking points. They had all of our organizations mapping of who we are, what our leaderships are. And it is because of this one effort and, ongoing efforts since then that have resulted in many of our leaders getting targeted individually. So this is a very strategic plan. And to infiltrate into our community in this way is really deeply disturbing. But I, for one, I know that I single-handedly blame these groups for derailing our efforts to stand tall and to build something for our community and to assert ourselves. But our vision didn't get realized. But as you know, we still do all of our work without the walls. We had wanted the walls because it's always nice to have walls and bricks and mortar, but we didn't have that. I know ITP contacted me in the very early stages, just as a tidbit, and I was literally in a restaurant And they called me and they said that, you have evaded taxes, and, we are calling from the, whatever their name was, Investigative Terrorism Project. And I was so taken aback because I knew that to label somebody as a tax evader is a very serious thing, to label somebody with that. And I immediately told them that there was no such thing. We're a nonprofit. We couldn't have possibly evaded the taxes. We are, this is a rental apartment. And because they were referring to the apartment that we had on the Upper West Side. And then immediately, the very next day, I got a call from the New York Times investigative department. And they were going to investigate the entire charity up and down. And when New York Times does an investigative report, there are all these bubbles and these areas and who gave money to who, and would have been a death sentence for our organization and any donor that would have given money to us or anything like that. And I spoke, and unfortunately, we had a legal firm already retained at that point. I contacted the legal firm. I spoke to the reporter. I told the reporter there is no such thing. There is nothing here. You can spend all the time you want, but there's nothing here. And we had already contacted the Attorney General, who was aware that our charity was under attack. Thankfully, we were able to avert this disaster, but it would have been much worse. So what I'm saying is that even though these people do something that might seem small and, throwing, mudslinging here and there, but somebody else bigger picks it up. And then that becomes a bigger story if we're not ready. So crisis management, we have to have our crisis management tools ready at all times within our organizations on how to avert crisis. But I'm fully behind you on this effort, and I applaud you for taking this to the level that you're taking it. So this is all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daisy. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate the steadfastness that you and the Imam and others who were working on Park 51 showed during that ordeal. I mean, that was one of, I dare say, one of the worst moments that Muslims have dealt with in this country in recent years. It was a rallying point for anti-Muslim hate groups that are still active today. You saw not only hate groups target us, but you saw so-called mainstream groups like the Anti-Defamation League get in on the fun and attack this project. And so it was really a horrible moment, but our community survived. We grew stronger as a result of it. We grew smarter, and the work still continued. And you've been doing amazing work, Ms. Khan, and you continue to do amazing work. You did not let them stop you. And so you're an inspiration to us, to the community, and alhamdulillah, Allah promises difficulties in this life, and He promises a relief upon relief. And alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for the relief, and we thank Allah for you and your work. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to take a question from the media. We have a question from the Washington Examiner. And the question was, have any non-Muslim organizations, Christian, Jewish, or secular, signed onto your letter to the DOJ? So let me first say that we really appreciate the support we have received from other communities, the Christian community, our Jewish allies, and humanist allies who have reached out to express support for us as we confront these attacks. So this letter is a Muslim community letter. This was only for the Muslim community to sign because the Muslim community was targeted. And so we wanted our community to come together with one voice and call for this investigation about IPT's attacks on us. So we certainly welcome the support we have received from other communities. But this letter was a Muslim community letter designed to bring our community together as one voice to speak about this issue. If there are any other questions, we'll take them. You can either bring them on screen or put their questions in the chat. I'll give it a minute before we wrap up to see if there are any more questions. Okay. With that, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to all of the signatories. If we can, let's put it on screen. It might take too long to read everyone's name, but let's at least put them on screen so they can be recognized. Many of them obviously couldn't join in person today, but we appreciate their support. Adams Center, the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, the American Islamic Center of Florida, American Muslims for Palestine, the Arab American Civic Council, the Arizona Muslim Alliance, the Blossom Valley Muslim Community Center, Bridges for Yemen, Birmingham Interfaith Human Rights Committee, Center for Security, Race and Rights, the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago, Dar al-Hijra, Engage and Engage Action, Equality Labs, Free Uyghur Now, ICNA Council for Social Justice, the Indian American Muslim Council, ISPU, who you heard from earlier, the Islamic Center of Boca Raton, the Islamic Center of Fullerton, of Passaic County, of Riverside, of Weston, of South Bay, Los Angeles, the Islamic Community Cultural Center, New Jersey, the Islamic Community of Tampa, Masjid Al-Qasim, ING, the Islamic Networks Group, the Islamic Society of New Jersey, ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Society of Orange County, the Islamic Society of West Valley, the Islamophobia Studies Center, Iqra Academy of Palos Verdes, I grew up in Palos Verdes, Jetpack Resource Center, Masjid Al-Ihsan of Florida, Majlis Ashura, the Islamic Leadership Council of New York, the Muslim Student Association West, Empower Change, our sister Linda Sarsour, the Mosque Cares, Ministry of Imam W.D. Muhammad, Muslim Advocates, the Muslim Alliance in North America, MANA, Muslim American Society, the Muslims for Democracy and Fairness, MuslimsForPeace.org, Muslim League of Voters, Muslim Federation of South Jersey, Muslim Forum of the Pacific Northwest, IMPACT, MUNA, the Muslim Ummah of North America, Muslims United for Justice, No Separate Justice, North California Islamic Council, the Palestinian American Community Center, the Pakistani American Congress, Sanad Trust Foundation, San Ramon Valley Islamic Center, South Asian Network, South Dakota Voices for Peace, South Florida Muslim Federation, Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research, Young Muslims, and of course, the South Florida Muslim Federation, and the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, and all of the many members of U.S. CMO. I got to the list. There are many more. If I missed anyone, please take a look at the list. Thank you all so much for your support, your solidarity. It was so great to see Muslims who were targeted and weren't targeted coming together on this issue. Thank you all for joining us today. We will keep you updated as we release more information. There is actually considerably more information we have about IPT that we have not released publicly. We obviously will be sharing that with law enforcement and releasing it publicly when it is appropriate to do so, inshallah, God willing. But if you are not familiar with it, just check online and see what we've released so far, and keep in touch with us and other organizations so you can get updates as they come out. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. May peace be upon you.